Good afternoon, everybody. There we go, that's better. Thank you all for making the drive down here to Bryce City. We're so excited to have our conference here at Ruby's Inn today. Oh, there's Ruby's Inn. What a beautiful drive, especially if you came from the north. We'd like to begin our conference with a big thank you to our partners and sponsors. Can you all join me in a big round of applause for all of these companies on our list? And I just wanted to point out, back at Ruby's Inn, we do have a sponsorship room, so make sure you visit the vendors and the sponsors that we have there and get some swag in that room. We also want to give a big thank you to our conference planning committee. If you are here and on this list, would you please stand while we give you a round of applause as well? I think it's been a few years since we've been to the National Parks area for our spring conference, and we're very excited to bring it back. We also want to give a big round of applause to Nicole. Again, Nicole is our executive manager for APA Utah, so she's been with us for 4 years, and she's the biggest reason why we have such great conferences and we've been able to expand. So let's give Nicole a round of applause as well. And lastly, we also want to thank our APA Utah board. We have a QR code here that links to the APA Utah website if you want to learn more about all of us and what we do. My name's Tippy Moreland, for those of you that don't know me. I'm the past president for APA Utah and the long-range planner for the city of Saratoga Springs. But we have such an amazing board. We've expanded with our bylaws change. If you voted in the last election last year, we've expanded our board to include a lot more amazing planners here in Utah. And let's give them a round of applause as well. We do have, that being said, with the board reorganization and with everything that we've been doing for programming for you Utah planners, we do have a lot of open volunteer positions. If you are interested in volunteering and participating as little or as much as you want to, please take a picture of this QR code as well and let us know, and we'll try to find a spot for you in one of our committees. Some of these include engagement groups, so these are kind of like the topical groups that we have. So they include the commissioners, the planning commissioners, our transportation roundtable, early career planners, and planners who work beyond city limits. These groups will meet at least quarterly, so let us know if you want to participate in these as well. And this one, you can just be a member, you can just attend these quarterly meetings and engage with other planners within your topic. I also wanted to say thank you for those of you who funded, who donated, that's the word, donated to our Gene Carr Scholarship that was founded years ago by APA Utah for students at the University of Utah, which is our only accredited planning program in the state. So thank you. The donation period has been closed and we didn't meet the goal. Yeah. I don't have the numbers, but we met the goal, so I know that was very exciting. In 2026, we also have elections. So we have 3 board members that are up for new planners to fill that position. So we have an opening for president, vice president, and a general board member. We have Jason, is it 7 board members? Is it 7 total board members that we have? 9. Okay, 9 total board members now. And so 3 of these positions are up for election through APA this year. Here are some of the deadlines. If you're interested, your nominations opens this Friday and will be open for about a month. And we will be reaching out to anybody who we think may be interested. I see some of you in here that I hope that your names are get put in as well. So if you're interested, find any of us on the board. We have these new name tags, and if you're interested, come up to us and let us know, and we can chat with you about getting you slated on for the election. And then as members, we'll be voting in August. Some quick announcements before we begin our programming for today, especially with a venue like this. We are so excited to be here at Ruby's Inn. It is a little bit spread out, so I want to explain how to get to where you are. So right now we are at Ebenezer's Grill, across the street from Ruby's Inn, and across the parking lot from the Best Western. When you look in your program, we have Ebenezer's and Ponderosa in green and purple. Ebenezer's is here, which is where we'll have these larger keynote addresses. The Ponderosa room is in the Best Western, just across the parking lot from here, as is the Cottonwood room, the C. So any sessions in Ponderosa in purple or Cottonwood will be in the Best Western across the street. And then we have 2 rooms on the 2nd floor in Ruby's Inn, again, across the street at the main check-in area where you check in for the hotel. The 2nd floor will have the Mezzanita and Pinion room and the Sage and Bristlecone room. So it's a little bit spread out this year. Don't hesitate to ask questions if you see anybody heading in that direction or any of us on the board with these name tags again. And we can help direct you around the venue. So, and we did give you hopefully enough time to walk between. It's about 5 minutes to walk in between. We do have some volunteers with those yellow vests. If you look in the back of the room, these like yellow, green, neon vests. We will have some student volunteers wearing those that you can ask for directions as well. Oh, we also have shuttles, so that will run regularly between sessions. So don't hesitate to look for the shuttles as well, although it is about a 5-minute walk between the venues. So if that was all clear, I think that's probably the most important announcement for today. The Wi-Fi, I think this room has a coded Wi-Fi, but every other venue has no password for the Wi-Fi. But again, if you have questions on that, don't hesitate to ask any of us with the conference. Tomorrow night, on Thursday, we do have our welcome reception at the Bryce Canyon Overlook here at Ruby's Inn. So if you haven't signed up for that yet, I think, is it still open on the website? Okay, so if you haven't signed up for it, find Nicole, find Nikki, and we'll try to get you in, but it's going to be a really fun barbecue over at the Bryce Canyon Overlook. So really excited for that. Again, that's tomorrow night. And with that, I want to introduce our first speaker that we have today. I'm very excited to be introducing Lance Syret. Let's see here. Lance is a current general manager and our gracious host here at the historic Ruby's Inn at Bryce Canyon City here in Utah. Ruby's Inn is the 4th generation family-owned business. And if you've come to Bryce Canyon, you know Ruby's Inn, you've driven by, you've driven through here. We're right at the heart of the entrance to Bryce Canyon. Lance is currently he's active in the industry as the former chairman for the Governor's Tourism Development Board. He's the past president of the Utah Hotel Lodging Association and the chairman of the Garfield County Office of Tourism Advisory Board. He's also a board member of the Utah Tourism Industry Association. And he also works on our outdoor recreation grants that a lot of planners are involved with, so pay attention to that. With that, let's give a big round of applause for Lance, our first speaker.
All right. Man, she really amped me up, so now I really got to live up to that. And of course, I get a microphone squill the very first thing I do. Well, first of all, welcome to Ruby's Inn. Welcome to Ebenezer's Barn and Grill. So this is a special venue. This venue's only existed, 15, 16 years or something like that. And we call it Ebenezer's. Does anybody know why we call it Ebenezer's? Let's do some trivia off the start. Somebody raise their hand. No, Brad, put your hand down. Danny, this guy.
Ebenezer Brown from Draper?
No, but that's a good guess. Ebenezer Brown from Draper? No, right back there. Ebenezer Bryce, thank you very much. So as you drive around Garfield County, everything from Panguitch to Tropic where I live and everything in between, everybody's got Bryce something. We're guilty of it too. We got the Bryce View Lodge next door. We got the Bryce Canyon Grand over there. And but when we built this venue, we said, we got to come up with something more original. And somebody said, let's do the first name of Ebenezer Bryce, the namesake of Bryce Canyon National Park. And that's why this place is called Ebenezer. So it doesn't have anything to do with Ebenezer Scrooge. It's Ebenezer Bryce. And he was a Scottish immigrant, come down here. And of course, his famous quote when I asked about Bryce Canyon, his namesake, was he said, well, they thought, well, is he going to say something about the geology or the topography or, the majesty? Nope. When they asked him about Bryce Canyon, he said, well, it's just one hell of a place to lose a cow. So that was his famous quote about Bryce Canyon. So anyway, but so welcome to Ruby's Inn. I'll tell you just a little bit about the place you are. So Ruby, first of all, was a man. So Ruby was my great-grandfather. His real name was Reuben, but we get people call the hotel all the time, and they'll tell us that Ruby was their aunt, and they need a discount. So anyway, so don't do that, because at least figure out the right gender there. So anyway, so Ruby was my great-grandfather. Yeah, as you go over to Ruby's, we don't have as many pictures over here because this is more of a tribute to Ebenezer Bryce. But as you go over to Ruby's Inn, you'll see the logo. You'll see him in a cowboy hat because Ruby wanted to be a cowboy. He grew up in the town of Panguitch, and Panguitch is about 20 minutes that way. And he grew up working at a flour mill for his father. And when he was growing up, he said, I want to be a cowboy. I don't want to work in the mill. He didn't want to work at the family business. When I was growing up, I didn't want to work at the family business. So anyway, so he actually borrowed some money from an uncle at the time, and he bought this land where we're standing here under the Homestead Act. And, I think they wish they would have had a good planner back then because, our story isn't a concise, well-planned out story. But anyway, so Ruby moved out here. This was his ranch. He was here for 6 weeks, and he had a cousin from Tropic, where I live, that stopped by to check on him. And he said, Ruby, how's your homesteading going? How's your ranch? How's your stuff going? And they were talking, and his cousin said, well, have you been to Bryce's Canyon yet? And Ruby said, no, what is it? Because Bryce Canyon wasn't a national park and a national monument until 1923. So people knew about Bryce Canyon, but it was still just a big unincorporated, beautiful area. Wasn't protected yet or anything like that. So anyway, so Ruby said, well, what is Bryce Canyon? He said, it's just a big hole in the ground, but you ought to go look at it. So anyway, so him and his wife and his 2 kids, my grandfather and my grand-aunt, they headed up for a Sunday afternoon picnic, went out to where Sunset Point is now, and they looked off in there and they said, this is the most beautiful thing we've ever seen. And they came back and they wrote letters to their friends and family and said, you guys got to come see this Bryce's Canyon. It'll blow your mind. So anyway, a couple weeks later, a relative took him up on it, come out here. They went out there, Sunset Point, had the same experience, said, this is so beautiful. And they said, wouldn't it be cool if we could sleep here tonight? So he came back here to his ranch. They got the necessary provisions. They went back, slept on the rim of Sunset Point that night. And this got him thinking. He said, I think people are going to want to come do this one day. So he wrote to the state of Utah because, it wasn't all federal land back then. It was there was a big state section right there at Sunset Point. And there was a spring there. So he said, this is a great place to build some services. So he wrote the state of Utah. He got a lease on that land, and he built what he called the tourist rest. And if you've been around today, I've been busy today. We just did the ribbon cutting on our new coffee shop across the street. And its namesake is from the original Ruby's Inn, which was on the rim of the canyon there at Sunset Point, called Tourist Rest. So we have Tourist Rest coffee. So you guys need some Go Juice tomorrow morning, go get you a cup of Joe over there at Tourist Rest. So anyway, but that's where the name comes from. So Ruby was instrumental in helping to make Bryce a national park. He started writing to the new National Park Service. The Park Service and us share the same birth date. They were created in 1916 as well. So anyway, the National Park Service is looking for new national parks in the West. They come out sniffing around, and he says, you got to make Bryce Canyon a national park. So, and of course, there was plenty of people saying the same thing, so they came in. And the National Park Service was partnering with the Union Pacific Railroad at the time. They formed a joint venture called the Utah Parks Company, and they'd bring people down to Cedar City. Anybody here from Cedar? Iron County? Nobody? Oh, there's one. Go T-Birds. I'm a T-Bird. All right. SUU. All right. So anyway, they'd bring them in. They'd unload them off the trains. They'd put them on these limousine buses, and they'd take them around to the national parks. And that was the Union Pacific Railroad. But I'm getting ahead of myself because the first thing they did is they come in and they said, people want to see these new national parks. We got to build infrastructure, right? You guys are infrastructure people. And they come in and they said, we're going to build these big national park lodges. And they came in and they looked at them, the Bryce Canyon, and they said, the best place to build a lodge is right where the tourist dress is. And so the first thing they did to my great-grandfather after helping create the national park was they kicked him out. So eminent domain, right? Here's a little money for your trouble now. Get out of here. So he came back here to the side of his ranch. And the ranch had actually grown quite big because the other settlers that come out here, they were just ranchers too. And he was the only one that caught the vision of tourism. And we're almost 8,000 feet in the air right here. So if you're walking around and you're out of breath, it has nothing to do with being out of shape. You know, me, I'm like, no, I'm not fat. I'm just out of shape. You know, or no, it's the elevation, I mean, sorry. So anyway, so if you're out of breath, it's the elevation. Blame it on that. But anyway, they'd give up. They'd sell their land to Ruby. And again, he was paying his bills with tourism, not from ranching. So make a long story short, all of a sudden he gets kicked out of the national park. He moves back here to the side of his ranch. He contacts the National Park Service, and he says, hey, you got all these plans and stuff. But they said, but what about your road into the national park? He said, where are you going to build your main road? And they said, well, we got a lot of options, and we're just kind of looking at some stuff. And he said, listen, the best place to build the road is on the north side of the national park. You come in from the north. That's where, you come up through Red Canyon. The road was already up through there. And he said, I'll give you the land to build your road on right across my big ranch up here at the north side. They said, well, we can't argue with that. So the best business decision he ever made was giving away a major portion of his ranch for the road. And of course, you guys know the three rules when it comes to real estate is location, location, location. So here we are, 110 years later, we're on the doorstep to Bryce Canyon National Park. And we always kind of joked around that as the family grew, that the business had to grow. So here we are, fourth generation. We've got fifth generation work here, and we've even got I think we even have a sixth generation family member that works here. So we've got a great team. We've got people like Brad. Brad's back there in the booth. He makes these conferences so easy for us, and it's going to be so easy on Nicole and the rest of the staff. They're going to be like, we want to come back to Ruby's all the time because it's easy. So, but we appreciate you guys coming. I'm around. My office is above the front desk there at Ruby's. If you have any questions or anything, hunt me down, and we just appreciate you guys coming down to have your conference here. Thank you.
Can we get another round of applause? Wow. All right, bring this down. Lance, thank you very much. We are very excited to be here, and you guys are excellent hosts. We look forward to spending the week here. I do have a real quick announcement before I transition to our keynote. We've heard that there's quite a bit of interest in the Utah Land Use Basics. There's a QR code to sign in. I understand if you scan it, it says it's full. You can still attend that session. Some of the sessions we have QR codes so that we can get a count and just an idea of who's attending. So even if you scan it and it says it's full, you can still attend. The only thing where there's caps, the only sessions where there's caps are the mobile tours. Correct? I'm looking at Nikki. She has all the answers. All right. I am excited for our keynote speaker today, Jennifer McBride, who is currently serving as the Wildland Urban Interface Program Coordinator for the Utah Department of Natural Resources, Division of Forestry, Fires, and State Lands. Her career has included work across multiple facets, including prescribed fire and wildfire suppression, wildfire prevention, education, and community outreach. I'm really excited for this session, as this is a topic, an issue that even last year, living in Springville in the fire that was up above our house, and having the conversations with my kids about the importance of wildfire and the risks of wildfire and what it is we can do. And so this is something that I'm really excited to learn more about. I'm really excited that Jennifer is here with us to share her thoughts. And with her, if we can go ahead and welcome her up.
All right. Well, great. I'm excited to be here with you guys. Obviously, the wildland urban interface and fires in the urban interface is a big topic. So thanks for inviting me out here to talk about all this important stuff. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay. So we named this session, "The Heat is On. What is up with wildfire risk in the WUI?" So hopefully that's what you all are here to learn about. So wildfire risk, really, it's no longer just a suppression issue, right? It's a land use, building code, building standard, public policy issue. It's kind of an all hands on deck issue. So we'll explore how wildfire hazard mapping, WUI code zones, boundaries, and standards, and recent legislation aimed at high-risk areas are reshaping how we build and plan, live in fire-prone landscapes. So we'll be connecting the dots between science, standards, and statutes today. So here's just a little bit of an outline about what we're going to talk about. Some of these things repeat throughout the presentation, but that's on purpose so that we get it into our long-term memory banks. So we'll go about a little bit about the history, kind of the big why we're doing things, and then tell you what we are defining as the wildland urban interface, or what we call WUI. What is the difference between a WUI zone and a WUI boundary? And then the awesome high-risk legislation that started in 2024 and is continued into 26's legislation as well. We'll kind of outline what is going on with that according to what our division is doing, and then some of the House bills that affected us this year with the 2026 legislation. And then we'll also have been getting a lot of questions out there about what's the difference between a WUI code and the NFPA home hardening and a building code. And I'm definitely not a code expert, but there are some things in here to help you kind of understand the differences. And then some ways that you as planners can help us in the division so that we can reduce the effects of catastrophic wildfire here in Utah. And then I don't know if we'll have time to go into the Monroe Canyon incident, but if we do, we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So for all of you history buffs out here, here's the big 30,000 foot level high wildfire policy timeline. So it's only about 155 years old, about 3 grandmas old, right? So the Chicago fire in 1871 kind of set us down this path with the beginning of the Forest Service in 1905, and then our Yellowstone fires, which you guys might be familiar with in 88, that were pretty devastating. So we also had the South Canyon fire in 94 that killed about 14 firefighters, and we also have recent firefighters that have killed, fires that have killed multiple firefighters. So we have this thing called the National Cohesive Strategy. We have that because the wildfire risk in the US had grown beyond what existing fire management can handle. So those wildfires that were starting to kill a bunch of people, like the South Canyon one in the late 90s or mid 90s, and some in the early 2000s, showed us that we definitely needed a coordinated approach to this rather than separate agencies doing their own thing. So there was a big effort to coordinate our approach. So we strive here to coordinate whatever wildfire mitigation, legislation, policies, local ordinances, we would love them to align to the tenets of this cohesive strategy, which is to restore and maintain resilient landscapes, build fire adapted communities, and have safe and effective wildfire response. So everything we do, we look at those 3 tenets and make sure that we're in line with those for whatever we're doing. So why is everyone talking about wildfire risk in the WUI? And you may see some spelling errors up here. I did use AI to try to beautify these slides, so, you know, AI can be trusted for a lot of things, but maybe not all things. But just to put it simply, the urban interface is where people intersect the most directly, and therefore where it costs the most for us to suppress wildfires. And that also brings the largest losses and safety risks. So largest losses to properties, residents, infrastructure, resources, and the biggest safety risk when we're trying to put those wildfires out. So that's why we are all still talking about it. Fires are not getting any less intense, as the weather gets drier and hotter and more people are around. So the risk in the WUI is increasing, which is why we are spending a lot of time trying to manage what happens in the WUI. So what exactly is the WUI? Everyone has their own definition. We will go on what my division, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, under the Department of Natural Resources, is calling WUI. So it's the wildland-urban interface is the zone where structures and other human development meets or intermingles with undeveloped land. So we're not really concerned much about the urban environment where there's a bunch of structures and also a bunch of cement and roads. We're not necessarily focused on those outliers. We know that there are people that live in the technical wildland, out and about. But we're really interested in where those two intersect. So where the homes become more spaced out maybe, and then the wildland butts up right against that. So that's what the WUI is to us. So then why have we been hearing about 2 WUIs? There's a WUI zone, there's a WUI boundary, there's a WUI area. People call, all different things. So So for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to call the WUI, local WUI, the WUI zone, and then what we have created at Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, because of the legislation, as the high-risk WUI boundary. So you guys' will be the zone, ours is the boundary. So what is the difference? So I don't know if any of you guys watch Elise Myers. I do. She's a comedian, actress. She always says, "That's a great question. I would love to tell you." So moving on to tell you guys what the differences are. So the county or municipality WUI zone, is defined in our Utah code as the line or area or zone where structures and other human development, including critical infrastructure that if destroyed would result in hardship to communities, meet or intermingle with undeveloped wildland or vegetative fuel. This is where Utah's wildland urban interface code is applicable and enforceable. So anywhere you draw that boundary, that's where the code is going to be enforceable by the county or the city municipality that's in charge of that. And it's typically designed by the local agency. So you guys as planners would be involved in that. And it's determined by analyzing findings of fact, like the presence or density of flammable vegetation, weather patterns in the area, slope, roads, access, whatever local knowledge you guys have that's going to bring those boundaries into a better realization for whatever your local agency can do with that. So Forestry, Fire, and State Lands is, we are supposed to help you guys in this effort. So we have some tools to help you guys determine your local zones. So we have a thing called URAP. It's the Utah Wildfire Risk Assessment Portal. So you can log on to that, and if you have never heard about it, don't worry about it. There'll be a QR code on here that you can look it up and play around in. So what that has in it are risk layers or themes of the map, and those theme layers include stuff like wildfire hazard potential, risk to drinking water and population, burn probability, damage potential. It also has the smooth structure exposure score, which we will also talk about later on in this presentation, and then the location of the high-risk WUI properties. So that's determined in our, I don't know, maybe we need IT now. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Maybe I just had to touch it. Okay, so you can use those themes or layers to look at where your area is in your state. We've done a bunch of determining where those layers are, a bunch of modeling where those are, or where those themes, how we came out with those themes. So we encourage you to use those. You don't have to use them as the only thing in determining. You should be using your local knowledge, right? I must be doing something weird. Maybe. Oh. I don't know. Well, we'll keep going. All right. So the structure exposure score is also a theme layer in there, and this is categorized at a 5 or higher. It's also, thanks to the legislation this year, in 2026, it's mandatory to consider now when you're determining your local WUI zones. So essentially, if you look at HB 48 from this year, you're going to need to at least plan for a structure exposure score of 5 or higher. Consider those in your boundaries. If you go lower than that, then you'll have to let us know some reasons why you're going lower than that. So, so definitely be looking at that as you're thinking about where your urban interface zone is going. And then again, the structure exposure score takes into account the burn probability, the damage potential, and also includes ember loading in that. Okay, so that's the local WUI zone. Now moving on to our high-risk urban interface, wildland urban interface boundary that we have created. So it specifically identifies the areas that are elevated for risk for wildfires. So there's wildfire risks, obviously more than just in where these red things that you're seeing, these boundary layer that you're seeing up here. All right, maybe I'll move here. So the boundary is really taking into account that higher level risk. It's more elevated than the rest of the area. So we picked a structure exposure score of 7 and combined that with some structure density. So we're not really concerned about those outlying ones that are just in the middle of the wildland or the wildlands, right? We're concerned more when the structures start being more together, because it's harder to suppress wildfires when you have homes that are close together, and trying not to make it so that there's an urban conflagration, which is multiple homes on fire at once. So if you think of your local fire department, they typically can only handle maybe 1, maybe 2 structure fires at the same time. They're not gonna be able to handle 30 or 40 at the same time. So as we see in those destructive fires in California or Colorado that are happening around. So I also wanted to point out that our structure exposure score, it wasn't just developed by a modeling exercise. It was also refined by our subject matter experts at the division, which spent a lot of time combing through this map. Now, is it perfect? Not exactly. You know, all models have room for error, and our subject matter experts are doing the best they can. So there are some probably still errors in there, and if you find them, you're encouraged to let us know where those are. Oh, there we go. All right. What's this one? Okay, so enter House Bill 48, which is the reason that we even had to define our boundary, that high-risk boundary. There's the history that I'll go into in one of the next slides, but House Bill 48 really told us, okay, forestry, fire, and state lands, you by law have to draw this boundary. So properties with structures within the high-risk boundary will be assessed an annual fee and encouraged to have a wildland urban interface law, a certified wildland urban interface law assessment done for their property. Why is this? We have to do some triage levels, and that law assessment helps in those, which I'll go into detail in a little later in these slides. So these assessments identify ways in which the property owner can reduce their wildfire risk through improving defensible space and and putting in some ignition-resistant construction. So it's more of an awareness campaign more than anything. So some of the history of this. So like I said, we didn't just think this up and decide that this was going to be what we were going to do and it's going to fix all the problems in the urban interface. It was studied. So in 2024, there was a House Bill 437 that directed us to study this. Like, what can be done? What's going on in the WUI? Used some science and assessments and risk to dwellings and a lot of modeling and a lot of thinking and what we could do with this high risk urban interface. Out of that, it produced the structure exposure score. So this is fairly new to the wildland world, this structure exposure score, the idea of it, but it is backed by the scientific research that they have. So it also recommended some future steps. So the SES of 5, 6, or 7 was what we recommended we use in determining where the wildland urban interface boundaries or zones would be. It also developed new mapping and data set process, and also we did some ground truthing and modeling, and we added home hardening data to that. That was kind of the history. What prompted it? So I kind of alluded to this. So as we were seeing the increased frequency and severity of wildfires, such as the Marshall Fire in Colorado, you're seeing a lot of deaths and a lot of structures going up in flames. So it's no longer just like, we do burn down structures in Utah, but typically not in the thousands, right? We've been pretty lucky. It's usually, 10, 15 here and there. Still not a great thing to ever have a structure burned. So like the no fatalities rule on UDOT's, roadsides, we kind of have a no structure loss rule in our suppression side of things. So the Marshall Fire, 2 deaths, over 1,000 structures. Hawaii, probably some of you saw that on the news. So sad. Over 100 deaths and over 2,000 structures. California, we all know that they have an urban interface problem, and they have the most elite firefighting source. They have a ton of resources, and they're still losing structures. So Palisade Fire in 25, also deaths and over 6,000 structures. So Utah, what are we worried about in Utah? We want to avoid this, any structure loss. So when we are talking catastrophic wildfires, when a wildfire happens and it goes over a large acreage, depending on where that fire starts, there could be loss of life, property, income, farmers' land goes up, or the local businesses can't get business because nobody wants to come to their area anymore. It's all burnt up. Resources, water. soil erosion going down, flooding into these urban interface areas, damage to the municipal water supply. That's very costly to fix when you plug up all the water infrastructure. There's also pollution. We have older generation, younger generation, people with asthma, water quality leading to health concerns, destruction of wildlife habitat. Utah is a big hunting state, and natural resources, disruption of critical infrastructure to communities, like power. So Rocky Mountain Power, I know, has it in their business practice that if there's a large fire in the area, they typically will shut that power down, because if they're losing any of their infrastructure, it could surge their systems and cause further outages. So reasons we definitely don't want catastrophic fire here. Also, it costs a lot of money. So last year, and these numbers can change. These aren't like hard and fast numbers. After the wildfire season, bills are still rolling in. So federally, about over 160 million. County, city, state, you see there. So the total non-federal cost to the state last year was over $31 million. So I can think of a lot of things we can do for $31 million. Total suppression cost was almost 192 million. So we want to keep that down if we can. So how many of you have heard of HB 48? Nice, that's awesome. How many of you have read the legislation? Great, awesome, great. So I'll let you know the kind of the major elements of HB 48. So it again made it so it kind of mandated us, put into law that we had to develop this high-risk urban interface boundary. It also said that if you're inside that boundary, the taxable structures inside that are going to be assessed a fee for living in that wildland urban interface. We're gonna also have to give those structures a triage level, so we'll be doing that by giving law assessments out. Well, I guess not giving law assessments out, you're gonna have to request that law assessment from us. It also has some language in there for having the local jurisdiction that if you're in the cooperative wildfire system, you're going to have to adopt the urban interface code. And then there are some insurance requirements in that bill. If you haven't read it, I would encourage you to read it. A lot of questions that we're getting can be answered by reading that bill. So the high-risk WUI boundary that I showed you in the slides. Let's go back to that slide. This slide. So if you go on the Utah Wildfire Risk Assessment portal, you'll see this pop up. So these red areas, that's what we're talking about here. So if you have a structure, home, owned property, and there's a structure inside that boundary, that's where you will be assessed a fee. So it's taxable structures only, and the fee will be based on square footage. So the boundary was finalized January 1st, so you can all go get in there. It's mandated that we annually update that boundary because fuels change, fires happen, people build higher into the urban interface, all kinds of factors change. So in that boundary, again, is a scientific analysis of the fire likelihood and intensity, ember load, and structure density. And then the boundary will be updated annually. Oh, I didn't even know I put things into that. All right, so what's a law assessment? How are we gonna do that? Who's gonna do it? What's going on with it? The law assessments are going to be the property owner's responsibility. So they're gonna have to request a law assessment from Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. The assessment will use a prescribed standard methodology. So that methodology has not been currently flushed out. So we're still in development of what that will entail. And then it also must be completed by a certified lot assessor. So right now, FFSL our division is in charge of certifying that once we develop that standard methodology. And so we will be getting that out to whoever would like to know what that is after we figure that out ourselves, right? So the lot assessments will then produce that triage scale, so 1, 2, or 3, and it'll be a lot based on the WUI code that we just passed. So the 2026, we just passed the 2024 code into Utah codes. So we'll be using that to produce whatever methodology or certification for these lot assessments, and that will be used for the triage scale. The property owners will receive the full report with the recommended actions to reduce the wildfire risk. So we'll also most likely be using some aspects of FireWise, and we'll be talking about that in more detail in a minute, and the IBHS, or the Institute of Business and Home Safety Standards, as well. Will probably go into this methodology that we're using. So lot assessments probably will look a little bit like this. We're not going to be using defensible space anymore. We'll be using survivable space for our lot assessments, because we don't like the idea of using defensible space and having the property owner think that they can stay there during a wildfire and defend their home, right? It probably, if the firefighters tell you to get out, you need to get out. And then some aspects of home hardening will be in that. So have you all seen this NFPA lot or standard for home assessments before? There's 3 zones. You got the closed zone, the 0 to 5 feet, the 3 to 30 feet, or 5 to 30 feet, and the 30 to 100 feet rule. So all those have different levels of what you need to be doing in those zones, and those will all be fleshed out in the methodology we're using to produce those lot assessments. So this is a lot. Hopefully you've heard most of this before, but all right. So the fee amount. Everyone wants to know, how much is this going to cost? What, is this going to be thousands of dollars? Is this going to be $10, right? So the purpose of the fee is to pay for the high risk WUI program. So that's the only purpose. So we're only allowed to charge in these fees how much it costs us to produce this triage scale and do the lot assessments and update the boundary, and the people that are working on that. So there will be a flat fee to get this program going, and that will start, it was going to start this year, but it will start January 1st of 2027 and be between $20 and $100, depending on your square footage of the structure that's on your property. Going forward, in 2028, the fees will be based on square footage, also the triage score from that lot assessment, and the cost of the state. So what happens if you don't get a lot assessment? Most likely you're just going to be assessed at that high triage score that says that you're the highest of the high, because we have no other way of knowing. All right. The other thing that came out of this, the other element, was the WUI code adoption, and this probably is most what you guys are interested in. So the current 2006 WUI code got replaced with the 2024 code. So the counties and the municipalities that participate in the cooperative wildfire system are now required to adopt and enforce Utah's WUI code. So this slide, I should have edited that, but it's now the 2024 code. So if you've adopted the 26 code, awesome. You now have 2 more years to adopt the 24 code into your local ordinances. and use that if you are in the cooperative wildfire system. If you're out of the cooperative wildfire system, we still encourage you to use the WUI code, because if you're building it the right way in the right areas, it's going to benefit all of us. Those suppression costs will go down. So yeah, so you have 2 years now to adopt the code, the new 2024 code. All right. Effects on insurance. This is another hot topic. Everyone's worried about insurances. I can tell you right now that people are getting dropped with or without our WUI high risk boundary. But now, insurers must use our high risk boundary when labeling a structure for high risk. They also, they're not restricted to just using our boundary. They can use other data sources to measure that risk. And then if requested by the property owner, the insurers have to disclose why your premiums have risen over 20% or the coverage, they're dropping you coverage if you're in this boundary. And then the division has to share your triage level with the insurer. So that's the only effects on insurance. They can still use their own models. They just have to tell you if they're going to raise your premium over 20% or drop you. If you're inside that boundary, they'll have to tell you why that is happening. So, because of all this awesome legislation, and it's actually, in my opinion, a great step forward. It's a very getting the awareness out that there is wildfire hazard, and that property owners need to be preparing their homes for wildfire, that it's just inevitable that there probably will be one in their area if they're in the wildland urban interface. So we've created at Forestry Fire and State Lands a high-risk WUI program. So the primary intent of this program is to increase the awareness of wildfire risk. It's also to encourage property owners to share responsibility for risk reduction in the urban interface. So no longer can someone just go plop their house next to the wildland and not do anything about it and make it everyone else's problem. We're encouraging them to share that responsibility, plant the right things, keep your vegetation down, construct your home in the right way, so that it's easier for us to suppress that fire around your home. Property owners can request that law assessment, and like I've been saying, personalized risk mitigation strategies will come out of that. So it's really good to get your own, personalized, what can I do on my property to reduce that? Because I don't think anyone wants to lose their home in that. And then again, the property fee supports those assessments. So whose job is it to do what? That's another thing that we've been having a lot of questions on. So the division, it's our responsibility to create that map. We set the fee at the division. That's not the county or the municipality that sets it. For the structures in that high-risk area, we set the triage standards, so we're coming up with that law assessment, we're coming up with how to certify people, we're coming up with the methodology for those law assessments. We develop administrative rules for the high-risk boundary. We maintain that the wildfire risk assessment portal with the high-risk boundary, and we make sure that remains visible. We also update that annually. And then we conduct the law assessments that are requested. So a lot of heavy lift for our division, and we're gearing up for that. So what's the job of the city or municipality? So what you guys need to do is adopt and enforce the WUI code. If you're in the cooperative wildfire system, it's mandatory. If not, we still encourage you to adopt that code. And then you have to define and map your local WUI zones in coordination with the counties. So you just got to define where your urban interface is and where that code is going to be applicable. Using our risk assessment portal, findings of fact, local knowledge, stuff like that. So what does the county have to do? The county collects the fee. They look like the bad guy, but we're setting the fee, the county's collecting the fee. So the county also has ability to adopt and enforce the WUI code. They have to adopt it, up to them whether they enforce it. We encourage that. And then they define their local WUI zones, and they may help us conduct law assessments. That's gonna be a county to county agreement between us and the county, whether they wanna conduct those law assessments or whether they want us to do it. And then they can participate in the cooperative wildfire system if they're in the high-risk WUI. So the cooperative wildfire system, if you guys don't know about it, it's just mostly an insurance policy for the counties, so that if they have a fire and they're in this system, it means that they're doing steps to reduce their wildfire hazard. And because they're doing that, the state comes in and helps with those wildfire costs. So it's a good thing to be in. If any one of you are wondering, it should be in there. So why did we set up this? Obviously, we want the property owners to reduce their wildfire risk. We want structure survivability in the event of a wildfire to increase, and the likelihood of those structure-to-structure ignitions to reduce. So that's what our hope is from this program that we're doing. All right, now we're gonna go into, but how did we exactly determine the risk? So we didn't do it across the table in our lunchroom. We brought in experts. We brought in a firm. There was international expertise on this, in this development of the risk, and they're experts in wildfire behavior and risk analysis. So we didn't take this lightly. We brought in the best. We're hoping to. I think what came out of it was pretty trustworthy. We spent a lot of time on it, and a lot of scientific knowledge went into that. So it calculates the risk. This is going down a little bit deeper by the severity of the fire, the probability, and the exposure. So probability takes into account where do fires start, and a lot of times fires start off of roads because of recreation, right? And times they start by lightning. There's a whole lot of human factors in that, a whole lot of natural factors that do that. So that goes into the probability. The fire behavior we look at in that is due to fuels and weather and the topography of the area that you're in. So obviously if you're in a chute where in the mountains where the wind funnels up all the time and you built your house in there, you're gonna be more susceptible to that wildfire risk than if you're on a low level or in somewhere that the fire's not gonna reach you as quickly. So the ember production from the fuels is the key component here when assigning that structure exposure score. So just because there's a bunch of pine trees, a mile away from your house, and you're still in the high-risk WUI boundary, because if all those pine trees light on fire and throw embers onto your house, and then those are what catches your house on fire. So we've seen that through through science. They've been studying how these structures have been burning down, and typically it's not because the flame front comes through and burns your house down. It's typically when those embers are flying through the air, landing in those eddies or places where your fall leaves land, or in those on your roof where you're not cleaning out your gutters or some aspect of that, catching that on fire, and then engulfs the structure. So that's why the ember production was heavily used in this, because that's what we're seeing is burning down a lot of these structures. So those risk models were combined with the structure density, and then that is what helps define that WUI area. So if you want to nerd out on the exact things that went into this, we do have a subject matter expert at the division, and I'm sure he'd be happy to explain it to you. And if you want his name, come to me and I'll give you his information. So here's just a visual of that, what I kind of just explained. So the risk, the likelihood of the wildfire, starting and spreading, the intensity, so where, what is it burning in, where is it burning, what's the weather, and then the vulnerability of the exposure. So where is the exposure to the community, and then where a community may be harmed by wildfire, so if you're susceptible to that. Here's the QR code I promised to show. So you can get on there and it will take you to our Wildfire Risk Explorer. And you can go around and play around in that. You can also go in there, put in your address. It'll tell you if you're inside or outside the high risk boundary, okay? So it's a good thing to use. And again, all those layers in there are for you guys to help you guys to define your WUI zone. So here's just the home page. So if you log in, you've never logged in before, you'll see this, it'll come up, it's the top one. So the high risk WUI properties, you see in that right hand corner, you can enter the address there, and then it'll tell you if you want to look at the map themes because you're deciding your WUI zone. Across the top there, you can go to that map themes tab, and it'll pull up all those themes for you to go through and look at your area. All right, I think we've already killed this topic. Like I said, I'm trying to get it into your long-term memory. I have to have repetition, so the high-risk properties map is what we just looked at. Again, where the fee is going to be, has to be certified law assessments, insurance requirements are in that, developed by us. And then again, just want to reiterate that that's just the top 5% of wildfire risk. There could be risk. Your next door neighbor's house could burn down and yours could survive a wildfire, and they're outside of the WUI boundary and you're inside the WUI boundary. We're not saying that there's no risk anywhere else. We're just saying that this is the highest risk to structures. All right, so enter this year a little bit more on the Wildland Urban Interface Code. So how it starts out is it's an international code, and then it gets refined to the Utah code when it gets adopted into Utah's building codes. So we only had 2 amendments go through. So there was a deletion of section 602, which was the requirement for fire sprinklers, and then also this other requirement is, unless approved by the division, no designated WUI areas shall be below a risk category of 5 threshold of the smooth structure exposure score map found on the Wildland Risk Assessment Portal website. So if you go on that website, there's a smooth structure score. Let me go back to that. That's the next one down. The smooth structure exposure score, if you go to where it's level 5, if you go below that, you just have to let our division know that this is where it is and it's below this, and this is the reason why it's below this, because we're cutting it off at a road, or whatever finding of fact, and typically we'll approve that, but we're supposed to look at those. So you've got to, it has to be a 5 or above unless we approve it. And then again, the fees postponed until January of 27, and then that is how we'll handle that. So, HB 215. This is a great one to get your arborists, your local landscape people on board with. It's also a good one to know because you can no longer restrict a homeowners association from prohibiting a property owner from removing vegetation on their property in the Wildland Urban Interface area in order to comply with the WUI code. So this is happening a lot up north where they had some conflicting ordinances where, if you take out one tree, you have to plant 2 more, and that was kind of counterproductive. So we're saying if it's in the urban interface area, we want them to be able to comply to that WUI code and those vegetation standards that are in there. And so HB 215 kind of helped that for us. So the municipality may not enact or enforce a land use regulation or adopt or enforce a policy that prohibits or has the effect of prohibiting a property owner from removing vegetation from a portion of the property owner's property if it's within the urban interface or if it's required to comply with defensible space. So that's a good one to know there. All right, I'll pause there for us all to catch our breath for a second. I'm feeding you full, a lot of information here. So like I said, there's been a lot of questions about, well, there's all these things, NFPA, FireWise, WUI code, building codes, fire codes. What the heck is each one of these things and how they differ? So here's just a little graphic to show you kind of how they're built. So the National Fire Protection Association is the NFPA. They strongly influence the development of the urban interface code, but they are not directly adopted into that code. They just serve as like a technical foundation or reference material. And then the International Code Council uses that when they develop that international code. So the international code, again, is what is presented to the legislature, and then we adopt it when we put our recommendations in as the Utah Wildland Urban Interface Code. So that I turns into a W. So that NFPA standards is really just where everything starts, and then those WUI codes are built off of that, and then the fire code, and then that building code, the residential building code, goes kind of overarching over that. NFPA, they develop a ton of codes, so they have fire, electrical, safety, all kinds of stuff. It's not a building code, just want to reiterate that. It's a national standard. So they do scientific research, they have done fire investigations after, fires, and they do field observations, and so the reason that it's widely accepted is because they have that backing of science. So, it's typically, the one that most everyone looks at as far as setting that best practice, and it serves as that key building block. So then what is NFPA FireWise? So, and the National Fire Protection Association has programs in it, just like everyone else. FireWise is one of their programs. FireWise USA, they provide steps for a community to reduce their risk. So it's also an awareness and recognition program. So it just recognizes communities that have come together and grouped together and are trying to reduce their risk. So we give them that FireWise recognition if they have that structure in place. And then it provides that actionable information. So this is why we're using, I shouldn't say we are using it, we're looking at this when we're creating our certification and methodology to create those law assessment standards. They have common home hardening actions. So they have these actions in FireWise. We may or may not adopt these since currently being built. So they have Class A fire rated roofing, ember resistant screens, enclosed eaves, non-combustible siding, retrofit your decks so that they're not like wood decks. And then they have those common defensible space actions, clearing flammable material out of that 0 to 5 zone, or that first red zone that you're seeing on this picture. And then your tree pruning and your fire resistant vegetation will go into that FireWise determination, or recommendation, I should say. So the Wildland Urban Interface Code, we've touched on this a lot. So there's that difference between the international code and then when Utah adopts it, it's published by the International Code Council. Utah legislature adopts it and amends the international one into the Utah State Construction Code that is held in 15A. This one is a change for this year. We used to hold that in our forestry, fire, and state lands legislation. Now it's in the building code. And also, Utah's WUI code is complementary to the state building codes. It's meant to be used in complementary, not one or the other kind of a situation. And then it is to be enforced by the local county or municipality. 2 minutes. Okay. 2 minutes, I see. So, moving quickly through these, it establishes those minimum standards, focuses on that structure ignition, and then structure requirements apply to that, vegetation requirements apply to that, and then the building codes, it's where the WUI code is only enforceable where you guys determine your WUI zones. And then fire codes are, I won't go into the fire codes. But here's something that I didn't want to skip, so I'm glad that I'm just at the end of this presentation. Some ways you guys can help us. So adopt the WUI code, declare your zones in your jurisdiction with your mapping overlays, ensure the enforcement of these codes through building permits, subdivision reviews, site plans, approvals, vegetation plan inspections. Use land use planning, so use URAP, use the other findings of fact when you're determining your zones. When you're planning for subdivisions and infrastructure, plan for multiple access and evacuation routes. These one way in, one way out things are really hindering our suppression efforts and also people getting out. Make sure you have adequate road widths and turnaround spaces. That's getting missed sometimes. Clearly marked address and signing. Adequate water supply and hydrant signage. I made that one in bold because there are a lot of communities that are going in and may or may not have adequate water supply to get to those hydrants to fill those in their areas. And then consider leaving strategic fuel breaks around your communities. Utilize ignition resistant instruction depending on the hazard. Support national and local wildfire initiatives. We got FireWise, we got Ready, Set, Go here in the state. We got Fire Sense, our human caused wildfire reduction campaign, and Living with Fire, our fire mitigation campaign. And then encourage your FireWise and WaterWise landscaping, and then support prescribed burning and landscape level fuels treatments are the ways that you guys can help us lower these costs of suppression and create those communities that can survive wildfire when they occur. So, are we good? Okay, I'll end there. All right. Thank you.